Everyone says this painting is about beauty, about a man who saw the world differently, who felt more than other people, who poured his suffering into color and light, and produced something transcendent. That is the story, the tortured genius. The swirling sky, the stars that burn too bright. We have been telling that story for over 100 years, and it has made the Starry Night one of the most beloved paintings on earth. But what if the beauty is the least interesting thing about it? What if the swirling sky is not an expression of emotion at all, but a precise scientific observation, one that no one else in 1889 had the instruments to make, and that researchers would not confirm until more than a century later, using satellite data and fluid dynamics equations? What if the village beneath that sky does not exist and was never meant to? What if the painting's most prominent object, the dark, flame-shaped mass dominating the left side of the canvas, is a symbol so specific to death in the tradition Van Gogh was drawing from that he could not have chosen it accidentally? And what if Van Gogh himself, in the letter he wrote about this painting, said that it was a failure? The Starry Night is not what you have been told it is, and once you understand what it actually is, the beauty becomes something much stranger and much more serious. The room in Saint-Rémy. In May of 1889, Vincent van Gogh checked himself voluntarily into the Saint-Paul-de-Mausole asylum in Saint-Rémy-de-Provence in the south of France. He was 36 years old. He had spent the previous year in Arles, where his friendship with Paul Gauguin had collapsed in a crisis that ended with Van Gogh severing part of his own ear. The incident had terrified him. He did not fully understand what had happened to him. He went to Saint-Rémy not because he was forced to, but because he no longer trusted himself to live alone, and because he believed, with the particular logic of someone who is genuinely afraid of their own mind, that a structured environment might allow him to keep working. He was given a room on the upper floor of the east wing. It had a window with iron bars across it. From that window, if he looked to the east, he could see the countryside of Provence. Hills, a village, fields, and at night a sky unobstructed by the lights of a city. He was not always permitted to go outside. During episodes, he was confined to his room entirely. He painted from memory, from imagination, and when he was well enough to stand at the window, from direct observation. The Starry Night was painted in June of 1889, roughly 1 month after his arrival. He painted it from his room. He painted it at night. And here is the first thing most accounts of this painting get wrong. The sky he depicted, while clearly heightened and transformed by his hand, was not purely invented. He was looking at something real. He was recording what he actually saw. And what he saw, it turns out, was more remarkable than anyone understood at the time. What the sky actually shows. In 2006, a team of physicists and fluid dynamics researchers published a study in the journal Physical Review Letters, examining the swirling patterns in the Starry Night. What they found was startling. The turbulent flow depicted in the painting, the specific way the sky moves, the size and distribution of the swirling forms, the relationship between large spirals and small ones, matches with extraordinary precision the mathematical patterns of turbulent fluid flow as described by the Russian mathematician Andrei Kolmogorov in 1941. Kolmogorov's work on turbulence is considered one of the foundational contributions to modern physics. It describes the precise statistical relationship between eddies of different sizes in turbulent flow, the way energy cascades from large swirling structures down to smaller and smaller ones according to a specific mathematical formula. This formula was verified experimentally using instruments and computational tools that did not exist until the mid-20th century. It describes something invisible to the naked eye, a structural property of fluid movement that cannot be perceived directly, but can only be measured. And yet, the proportions in Van Gogh's sky conform to it. The researchers compared the patterns in the Starry Night to other paintings, including works by Van Gogh himself from periods of relative psychological stability, and works by other artists depicting similarly dynamic skies. None of the others showed the same correspondence. The Kolmogorov scaling appeared specifically in the paintings Van Gogh made during intense psychological episodes. The researchers proposed, carefully, that what Van Gogh may have been perceiving during these states, the heightened sensitivity, the visual intensity that he frequently described in letters as a kind of overwhelming clarity, was the actual turbulent structure of the atmosphere, visible to him in a way that it was not visible to others. He was not distorting what he saw. In a specific and measurable sense, he was seeing more accurately than anyone else. The village that was never there. Now look at the village in the lower portion of the painting. It sits peacefully beneath a violent sky, a cluster of buildings, a church spire, soft lights and a few windows. the whole scene rendered in cooler, calmer brushwork that contrasts with the churning sky above. It reads as a specific place. It looks like Saint-Rémy. It is not Saint-Rémy. The village Van Gogh painted does not correspond to the actual town visible from his asylum window. The church spire in particular is wrong. Its architecture is distinctly Northern European, specifically Dutch, of a type that does not exist in Provence. Van Gogh grew up in the Netherlands. He spent his early adulthood there. The church in the Starry Night is not the church in Saint-Rémy. It is a church from his childhood or from his memory of a place that felt like home. This is not a minor discrepancy. It changes what the painting is doing. If Van Gogh had been painting what he could see from his window, the village would be a documentary element, part of the observed scene. But the village is imagined. It is assembled from memory and longing. It is the kind of place you paint when you are confined, ill, far from everyone who raised you, uncertain whether you will ever be stable enough to live freely again. The peaceful village beneath the overwhelming sky is not a description of where Van Gogh was. It is a description of where he wished he could be. In between that wish and the sky above it, that scientifically turbulent, objectively extraordinary, personally unbearable sky, there is the whole distance of his situation. The tree on the left. There is one more element of this painting that almost no one discusses in proportion to its importance, and it is the largest single object in the composition. On the left side of the canvas, occupying the full height of the image from the bottom edge to the top, is a cypress tree. It is painted in dark, flame-like strokes, twisting upward with an energy that echoes the sky's own movement. It is closer to the viewer than anything else in the scene. It is, by any compositional measure, the dominant element of the image. And yet in most discussions of the Starry Night, it is treated as scenery, a framing device, a vertical element that balances the horizontal sweep of the hills. Cypress trees carried specific symbolic weight in the European artistic tradition that Van Gogh was deeply immersed in. They were planted in Mediterranean cemeteries. They were associated with mourning, with the underworld, with the passage between life and death. Van Gogh knew this. He wrote about cypress trees extensively in his letters, describing them as among the most beautiful things in the landscape, but also as belonging somehow to death, beautiful and dark in equal measure, like the Egyptian obelisk. He wrote to his brother Theo. He was not placing a cypress tree in this painting because it happened to be growing outside his window. He was placing it there because of what cypress trees meant, and because he was a man who had been confined to an asylum and was living with considerable seriousness in the awareness of his own fragility. The cypress stands between the viewer and the village, between the viewer and the sky, at the edge of the composition like something that is both beautiful and final. What Van Gogh said about it. In a letter to his brother Theo, written in June of 1889, Van Gogh described the Starry Night as a failure. He had been working on a series of paintings based on direct observation, painting what he could see in front of him with the discipline and faithfulness he most admired. And he felt that in the Starry Night he had allowed himself to go too far into abstraction, too far into something that came from inside him, rather than from the world. He called it an exaggeration in terms of composition. He said the study I did of it was one of the less successful things. He did not think it was a masterpiece. He thought it was a work in which he had lost control. This is worth sitting with. The painting that the world now considers his defining achievement, the painting that hangs in the Museum of Modern Art in New York and draws larger crowds than almost anything else in the building, was, in Van Gogh's own assessment, a painting where he had failed to do what he was trying to do. He was trying to paint the world with absolute fidelity. Instead, he painted something that came from somewhere deeper than observation, somewhere he did not fully understand and was not sure he trusted. He was right that it was not what he was aiming for. He was also, by any subsequent measure, wrong that it was a failure. What the painting actually is. The story we tell about the Starry Night, the tortured genius, the swirling emotion, the beauty born of suffering, is not false, but it is incomplete in a way that diminishes the painting by making it simpler than it is. What Van Gogh actually made was a painting in which scientific accuracy, personal longing, and symbolic intention exist simultaneously without resolving into each other. The sky is both an emotional expression and a mathematically precise depiction of turbulent flow. The village is both a real element of a composition and a memory of a place that could not be seen from where he stood. The cypress is both a visual anchor and a meditation on death. And the whole thing was declared a failure by the man who made it, who was looking at a canvas and judging it against an intention it had exceeded in a direction he had not chosen. That tension, between what Van Gogh was trying to do and what he actually produced is not a story about genius despite suffering. It is a story about something that happened in the space between a specific man at a specific window on a specific night in June 1889 and the canvas in front of him. Something passed through him that he did not fully control and could not fully explain, and it left marks on the canvas that physicists would still be studying over a century later. That is not the romantic story, but I think it is the true one. I'd love to know what you think. Did you know that Van Gogh called this painting a failure? And does knowing that the village is imagined rather than observed change the way the painting feels to you? Let me know in the comments. I'd really love to hear your thoughts.